Well. Today I am introducing y'all to an old friend of mine and colleague and past client, Jamie Glowacki. She is the expert on potty training and parenting and new paradigm parenting. When we met, it was because you were a client of mine, Jamie, and at the time you were the world's renowned expert on potty training. But things have gotten so much bigger than that since then.
Yes, for sure.
And our friendship, like it actually expanded into Costa Rica. When I moved to Costa Rica, she was also looking to come to Costa Rica, and she bought a house there in Puerto Viejo, and I moved into her house, and um, that was an adventure.
Yes, indeed. Continues to be an adventure.
Continues to be an adventure. I've been in that house many times since moving out, actually, because I know the people who continue to live there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, Jamie and I have a lot in common. I'm really excited to introduce y'all to her, and yeah, we'll just get this party started. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is already so great and different than most podcasts I do. Because
I
very few people want to take parenting to a very new paradigm, which is where I want to take it.
like I just told Jamie before we hit record, like the sky is the limit. We can talk about anything when it comes to parenting in the new paradigm. So yeah, let's see where this goes. I'll just open the portal with my question, which is, in this incarnation right now on the planet, what is your soul's purpose?
To heal trauma through psychedelic use, period.
Mm,
Right now. It may change.
yeah.
But right now, today, on this planet, that's what it is.
Right now in this incarnation
Yep.
at this moment, to heal trauma through psychedelic use. Wow. And you don't even mention kiddos and parenting into that in that purpose.
Well, it comes into parenting in a great deal because as a parenting and potty training expert, I work with reactionary parents, which means they very reactionary. And especially now, the pandemic, of course, made everybody crazy, but it's getting worse and worse. And there's a couple of things. I'm going to go off on tangents because my mind's already going to explode with where we could go. But one of the things that I'm hearing from parents, number one, is enmeshment. So they're too closely identified with their children. They are highly reactionary. So they'll come to me for parenting issues and say, well, they need to be quiet. I am triggered by noise. And I'm like, well, that's a you problem. That's not your 3-year-old's problem. Your 3-year-old, his job is to be noisy. That is triggering you as a you problem. And so started getting down to the you problems of parenting. And it turns out that I think just about everything is a trauma response, just about everything, including poor boundaries. And so when we can do our trauma work, that all makes parenting easier. The problem is most people don't do their trauma work until they become parents, because our children are here to pour our salt into any wounds that we have let fester and haven't taken care of ourselves. And you know your child, like in a very spiritual context, that they were put here as part of our healing. And so like we have to keep the healing going or we get stuck with the generational trauma. So the problem is, like for me, I did intense trauma work before becoming a parent. So then becoming a parent, I was like, oh, I can see these hot buttons, but they weren't so reactionary. Yeah. And there may still some be, there may still be some reactions, of course. But what I'm finding with the parents that I work with is they haven't touched their trauma work. Their kids are bringing it all up. And now they're trying to do trauma work in the middle of parenting. Well, true trauma work takes a lot of therapy, a lot of different modes of therapy and time. And you're going to consistently be thrown in. So like you go to therapy, you unpack some shit, you get like, you're crying, you're working through something, your time's up, you pack up your bags. If the therapist is good, they know how to close that box, but most therapists don't. And so the parent then goes home to a screaming kid, dinner needs to be put on the table, like real life smacks you in the face. So when, for example, when I was doing my trauma work, I was in San Francisco, I was single. I could lay on a couch for 3 days and watch Netflix if I wanted to, like I could let things process slower. So there's no processing time as a parent. So when I started working with psilocybin in particular, it's like, man, you can bust through so much trauma in 1 or 2 journeys instead of years of talk therapy that may not even help you, right? And I see parents going through talk therapy, then that doesn't really work. So then they try like EMDR, they try all these other modalities, but they're still actively parenting. And it's so hard because, you got a kid, they're needy little fuckers, especially when you're down. Like when you need a minute, they're like, they sense it and they're up your ass in the best ways, of course. And so I just think it's the fastest way. And if we can heal that trauma, I'm just seeing generational trauma keep just keep playing out like a broken record because parents aren't fixing their glitches.
Wow. I mean, what a way you have come since we first met. Now that you are openly talking about psilocybin, you're guiding parents and people through psilocybin journeys to work on healing trauma so that they can be, show up better in the world as
Yeah.
parents and as individuals. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
What do you mean
amazing.
I've come so far? I was never like closed.
No, what I mean is like to be publicly talking as a professional about
Yes.
psychedelics
Yes.
is a huge. I mean, I think like your the book that I remember, I don't know if it's your first book, but the book that I remember is what, Oh Crap,
Potty training. Yeah.
Oh crap, Potty Training. Nowhere in that book would you talk about psychedelic use or psilocybin use,
Right. And to
right?
be fair, like even on my own stuff, like on my podcast, what I'm doing is I'm literally like, this is the first podcast where I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. So what I've been doing is like leaving breadcrumbs. I say it on my podcast all the time that I've been trained in trauma-informed psychedelic use. And nobody has picked up the breadcrumbs yet. And like, I'll put something on my stories, like NPR just did a whole article about how moms are microdosing to get through parenting. And so I'm eking it out slowly so that I'm not like, hey, I know y'all are potty training, but if you do mushrooms, your life will be a little easier.
Oh my God. I
Well, it
love
would
it.
be, right?
I love it. It would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
Well, NPR, now that Netflix has How to Change Your Mind, and there's just so much out there in the public now about psychedelics that it's really nice. And especially the hype about microdosing, because I feel like that's a really good entry. Because I'll drop that at a party and people be like, oh, microdosing, you microdosed? You know what? I want to know more about it. And that's a good gateway into like a substantial journey.
Absolutely. And it's becoming increasingly mainstream, as from what I can tell. I mean, there's states that are legalizing it, decriminalizing it. It's becoming more common for sure. I mean, I moved to Maui so that I could assist, or in large part so that I could assist with plant medicine ceremonies,
Hmm.
and and talking about it publicly on my podcast and in my Instagram. I used to work for the federal government,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah,
so
I'm so like maybe convinced isn't the right word, but so impassioned about how healing it is that it's almost like well, I wouldn't be arrested, but like just come at me because I have the answers. And if I think the biggest thing is dispelling this whole like people jumped off of buildings, in a psychedelic frenzy. I think that's the biggest misnomer. And Pascal's almost 17 and we talk about it very openly because I'm like, dude, I would way rather you be doing mushrooms than anything else, than alcohol or even THC can be really damaging to the teenage brain. So I think there's just like dialogues to be had about safety, about efficacy, and what you might need it for. I love that people are tripping balls right now, but I tell people all the time, like, I'm not a trip sitter. Don't come to me. I'm not just helping you just trip balls. That doesn't interest me. Like, you're gonna come and we're gonna do a journey. And if that means processing before, processing after, going in with intention. Yeah.
amazing. Can you share with me, even just beyond the use of psychedelics to heal trauma, which is a beautiful, beautiful mission on this planet right now, and one that I share for sure. I love it. Um, what would you say is another example of what it means to be parenting in the new paradigm?
Oh, for sure. Well, so I always say right now, anybody who's a parent, we're between worlds, right? Because we're not old school. So we let go of things like disrespecting our kids, spanking, all those like old school, that paradigm. We haven't found our way. Like we are the new paradigm, but unfortunately there's no roadmap. So we're all just winging it. And luckily, say I have a child who is almost 17. So I find that more and more people are calling me their village elder because I've done it and I've done it well. So I have a bit of a roadmap. I'm not saying I'm the expert on that because I have my faults as a parent, but I find more and more people are like, can you just give me a little bit of the trail map here? Because for example, in the new paradigm, what I'm seeing is gentle parenting gone amok. So this is the notion that we don't want to be disrespectful to our child, but what it's leading to are no boundaries. Kids are all over the map, kids feeling psychologically unsafe, really reactive behaviors in the children. And so it's like this pendulum that's swinging wide from side to side. And what happens in the face of this gentle parenting, so let's say a parent has a baby, says, okay, I want to do gentle parenting. And you know what that means, right, Sarah? Like, yeah. So essentially, if anybody listening doesn't know, it's trying to, at its core, it's trying to be very respectful to the child, right? However, it gets very mucked up in if there are no boundaries. And so that's what some people think it means. It's just no boundaries. The children can do whatever they want and they'll learn themselves, but they don't. So I went off on a tangent there. I forgot what I was talking about.
Well, I asked you the question of like, what does parenting look like in the new paradigm and you were saying that at least currently how it is, well, we're a bridge, but currently how it is that the pendulum has swung from this like really strict old school model to the gentle parenting run amok. And I think you're getting to like, what is the synthesis? What is that? What is the,
right. And that's
like,
where my work generally comes in. And I call myself the marriage of old school and new school. And I like that word synthesis. That's a better word. It's like, how can we take what was good and come up with a new way? We don't have to throw out the whole baby with the bathwater. So a lot of people are even like, they don't talk to their parents because they don't like the way they were raised and they have trauma work. Well, if you don't talk to your parents, you just fucked yourself or your village, because oftentimes our parents are the village. They'll help care for the baby. You know what I mean? Or we move really far away from them because we don't like the way we were parented. So I'm just trying to find that balance in my work. But that's where I think the new paradigm, I don't have a succinct answer for you clearly, but it's not like the vision I have is that we're all just very respectful with boundaries.
no, I completely agree with you though. And by the way, I love Pascal. He's a wonderful child. Pascal and Indy got to hang. Pascal's obviously significantly older than Indy, but they got to hang a bit when we were all in Costa Rica. And
You
he's
can't
just
even believe he's so huge.
brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant kid. I love him to death.
Yeah. So if I can expound just a little bit more too, what
Yeah,
happens,
go
I
for it.
think, is in the new paradigm, which somewhat encapsulates gentle parenting, if things don't go the way we planned, because if you think about it, your vision of parenting typically starts when you were a kid. So you start that vision while you're being parented, right? So then you have this vision of parenting, and when it doesn't go according to plan, your only default button is how you were parented, right? And so that's why it's so important to clear the trauma work, because yes, my mother did some things good, but if I parented my child the way I had been parented, we would just be old school. We would not have the relationship we have now, which is astounding. He wouldn't be such a great kid. We'd have just a different thing. And I can see it in his kids, his friends' parents. It's like they talk this really good game of being respectful and we talk about anything, but then when a hard issue comes up, they get grounded, they get yelled at, they get back to this old school paradigm, right? And so for me, I say, Pascal, you're almost 17, like you're almost an adult. Like how could I ground? That's so punitive to ground somebody. Like if you do something wrong, we talk about it. How could we have done it differently? Like we discuss it in a different way, right?
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me, like I feel like I parent. I love how I parent. I just want to say it. I love what I've done. I love my child.
Yeah.
And what I have done from the very beginning is seek to create an intrinsic motivation to be in integrity, to do right, to do
Mm-hmm.
good. And by explaining things instead of just being like, there are those moments where you're like in a rush and you're like, because I said so, just do the thing. But
Yeah.
for the most part, it's like, okay, so here's why I want you to eat these vegetables.
Right.
And it's because I want you to be a freaking superhero. Like,
Right.
I want you to be strong. And, and that's a minor example. Or here's why it's really good to, I'm not going to force you to say please and thank you, but here's why it's nice for people to hear that,
Right.
because we're entering into this relationship of reciprocity. I don't necessarily use that language, but like where they feel really joyful to give and you feel really joyful to receive and you feel really joyful to give. And then the thank you just flows out, as opposed to it being this like requirement. And there's so much like that I'm just seeing with my child as he gets older. He's 7 now, and that he's really intrinsically motivated
Yeah.
to do what's right, or to be in integrity. Like there's
To be a
no
good
line.
person, to just be a good
Be a
person.
good
And when you try
person.
to force somebody to be a good person, they don't end up being a good person.
No.
So I think we're actually figuring out the new paradigm as we're talking, which is it's not just respecting the child, it's a communication. It's connection with communication. And it's not it's authentic. It's not
It's transparent.
false.
It's
Yeah,
transparent.
it's transparent and it's
So
authentic.
when Indy says something like "what is sex" or "what is this" or "what is," I remember during when things were getting really intense politically, and with violence around the world, and he heard me say the words World War III, and he's like, "What is that?" I don't just say, "No, kid, I'm not talking to you about that. That's not for you. That's not for child's ears." I
Yeah.
don't do that. I say, "Look, there's only so much I can share with you developmentally at this age, because
Right.
you don't need to worry about those things. But what I can share with you is this, you know."
Yep.
And I'll share as much as I can, and then he'll be like, "Do you think you'll be able to tell me more next year?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah," and it's
Yeah. Well, and I always said, the rule of thumb with all these hard topics too is like, answer the question that's asked,
yeah.
and so it's, because if we start talking, we're going to give too much information. But like, there's this funny story of my friend, I talk about this on my podcast. Um, her kid walked in and they were having sex. And she was like, what was going on? And the mom like launched into this whole explanation. It was literally, the girl was like, no, like, why were your legs were in a funny position? Like, she really was just concerned about the leg position. And she didn't want all the other information. So it's almost like you have to like take a minute, like, what was the question asked? So I always revert back to that when it comes to like these hard subjects.
Yeah, but I do think it is all about the transparent communication, for sure. And I was so lucky because Indy's dad, we're not together anymore, but we're dear friends. Indy's on FaceTime with him now, actually in the other room. He is very expert in nonviolent communication in
Oh
NVC.
yeah.
And in fact, he was sort of familial, and I was too, with the Bay NVC crew up in the Oakland area, in the
Oh
San
nice.
Francisco
Yeah, I'm
Bay
not an
Area.
expert, but I am well practiced. I love it.
Yeah, I've been to retreats, and like I immersed myself in that world for several years up there whenever I lived in the Bay Area. And that has helped me so much. And that's not just nonviolent communication, or NVC isn't just about communication. It's also about self-understanding,
Yes.
and like really getting clear on like, what is it that I'm feeling and what is it that I'm needing, and what can I request. Um
And most people can't do that because of trauma. So
yeah.
that's where the trauma comes in again and again. And I find with parents, going back to that transparent communication, the skill. First of all, I'm so happy to hear you say, I love my parenting. That is so refreshing and so rare. I'm going to make all my clients say that. Like, just, I love my parenting. I feel the same way. But one of the things that Pascal and I both have gotten so good at is not only apologizing, but going back and saying, what happened? Where could it have changed? And where did I go wrong? Where did you go wrong? And really trying to prevent it for the next thing. And knowing that, yeah, we're gonna have blow-ups. Like, we're all gonna lose our shit at some point or another, but rebounding really fast and saying, oh my God, I just put that on you. That was not intentional. That was all my shit. The problem was the door squeaked when I was on my podcast, and then you walked in the room and I blame it on you. You know? And he's like, okay, I got you, Ma. That's cool.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Yeah, Indy's very forgiving if I apologize, and I'm like, I totally lost my shit there. I'm sorry, and he's just like, it's cool, Mom, but that was rough. You know?
Well, too, I think it's interesting, like, explaining what happened without having a lame ass apology, which is like, I'm sorry I got mad, but if you hadn't done X, Y, and
Oh
Z,
God, no.
that kind
No, no,
of
no.
old school parent apology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
recently you posted on Instagram that something that I loved, and you were folding Pascal's laundry because he was working.
Yeah.
And it was so sweet because you were just like, I'm not coddling my child right now. I am
Right.
showing him, I am leading through example of how to show up in the world for each other. And
Right.
I just loved that so much. I just thought that was so beautiful.
That's so thank you. Yeah, it was really funny. Part of part of that was like I suck at Instagram. So I'm like trying so hard to find like I don't know how people do it. Like they document every breath they take. And I just don't think I'm that interesting. And so I'm like trying to find these like real life things that I can put into parenting, even though I'm parenting every day, it just doesn't occur to me. And but you know what's interesting? I had a lot of people comment, not a lot, enough to bug me about like, oh, does your arm hurt from patting yourself on the back? Like just do your kids' laundry. Like who, and I was like I couldn't tell. And maybe they're just trolls like trying to aggravate things. But and I was like, no, I'm just showing people what I'm doing to model everything. So it was weird. Yeah, it was a weird post. But
Oh,
most people loved it because they got it.
yeah. Well, F those trolls. No, I
Yeah.
don't mean, but let's
It
send
is
them love and compassion
it is
for all the
the
trauma.
it is the modeling though. That's what I find too is like
Yeah.
and in this new paradigm of parenting, because I talk to my clients, I did a podcast recently about modeling. Like you want your child to be kind, and then you get into somebody cuts you off on the road and you're like, fuck you, motherfucker. Like your kid's listening, so all these times that we just want them to be kind, and I hate that word because I think it's too ubiquitous and too ambiguous. Oh, be kind, be nice. And it's like, yeah, but you're a raging bitch. Like you got to get that under control so you can model that so that your kid will be kind.
Yeah, totally. That's the one thing, one of the many things I love about having become a parent, having become a mom, is that it has called me up to be the best person I possibly
Yes.
can be so that I can model that for my kid, because there's a lot at stake. We've got a crazy fucked up world going on right now, and we've got to raise our kids in such a way that they are self-connected, they are authentic, they can communicate, they can't enter into states of genuine reciprocity with the people in the world around them,
Yeah.
and have worked through any trauma. Hopefully they don't have much trauma, but just living in this world will give you some, so that they have
Exactly.
have the tools to be able to work through that. But being a parent, being a mom, has really just like it if you take the challenge, it calls you forth to be like, okay, so instead of saying fuck you when that person cuts you off on the road, how am I going to handle that? Or when I do get
Right.
into when I am going through a breakup and I'm pissed off, like how am I going to handle that, like in front of my child? And when he asks
Yeah.
questions, why are you mad at him, or what happened? Like how am I going to respond in a way that's self-responsible?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you just said something key though, and it's going to open another tiny can of worms.
Yay.
Don't you think it's fucked up that we get married, we go through all the relationship first, and then we have the kid, which I understand why it's set up that way. But you said as you were dating, and I find that dating as a parent has been the most beneficial thing because my child has gotten to see it up close and personal. He's gotten to see the modeling of like what a red flag looks like, what I think, or when somebody isn't interested, or boundaries, or um, no, I have a funny feeling, or no, I don't want to. I don't. It's so funny because I was like, most kids need us to be in active relationship, not married and settled and taking care of business, right? Don't you find that?
I've never really, I mean, I guess I have thought about it, but I've never really thought about it from that angle before. I have thought about sort of like, okay, Indy's getting a real lesson in what it's like to be a single mom, you know?
But in relationship,
But
and if we're
yeah,
transparent, because I've always
yeah,
been transparent, it's like these things that can be so challenging when you're first learning how to be in relationship, right? Like, oh, I
yeah.
don't want to make the other person mad. And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't care if he's mad. I just set a boundary. If he's mad, that's a red flag, So I don't know. It's been I was like, wow, I think we have the system wrong. I think we should be dating in front of our kids. I'm sure that really works.
I don't know how that works, but I like it.
So y'all should just get a divorce and start dating pretty good.
um, wow, amazing. We've tread so much ground already.
Yeah.
Um, where to go next?
That's because I talk like a motherfucker.
Well, it makes sense that you have a podcast and now two podcasts and
Yeah.
you know.
There's no easy answer. There's no yes or no with me.
Well, is there let's think. Is there anything else around like in the category of new paradigm parenting that we could shed some light on for ourselves and for our listeners? What it is to really raise a child to be, I mean, my intention is to, not that I want to put too much pressure on my poor kid, but to raise a kid who can be a leader in this new world that we're creating, or that I hope that we're creating, one that is regenerative and one that is built on, reciprocity. And
Wow, you got lofty goals. My goal is
I
to raise a kid
know.
who doesn't need therapy. um, yes. And I think that naturally happens. So with so much in the world, right now, and everybody's got their own value systems. We're particularly into regenerative farming, which has to do with keeping cattle on the land and eating meat. I think largely what I have found, and now that Pascal is old enough to be vocal about things, is that you just kind of keep doing you, and Indy's going to pick up the values. Like, I don't know that we can actually. I think it's sticky when we get into like, I would like to raise a leader, unless, I mean, you're being you, because you're just he's gonna be that kid anyway. But when I work with clients, because it's like, yeah, we got to watch the kid in front of us, because some kids, Pascal's not a leader, he's a manager. He
Mhm.
can really manage people, and he can see what's going wrong in any system, but he's not going to have the grand idea and set forth. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but also I think just the way you live, you're modeling it. He is going to be a leader in this world because of who you are, you're paving the path so he can just walk on it.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful.
Well, because look at how much you've traveled, look at the like how you fall into ceremony, look at how you just even think of like your work life. You don't have fear, the universe is going to catch you. Anybody who travels like that has no fear, because I mean, you have healthy fear, of course, I'm sure, but you have a sense, at least my impression of you, and I think this is where we resonate together, is like the universe has got me. Like, I have a sincere belief that the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, has my back.
Mhm.
This essence is going to fuck with me to my dying day like a cat with a string, but has got my back in the end. And so I think you will automatically get that. That's why I keep saying I think the new paradigm is take care of your shit, take care of you. And to add on to what we've discussed about the new paradigm, I would say there's too much overparenting. There's too much focus on the child in the center. And then everything else falls apart for the parents. And then you can't lead the way. Then the child's leading the way and the child has no clue. They're 3.
Yeah. Yeah, there are ways in which I think of myself as being almost a selfish parent because I take my kid with me wherever I travel.
Yep.
I've got an agreement with his dad, and he's so supportive, thank goodness. But I take Indy with me wherever I go. Whenever I, even like when I was living in Puerto Viejo and I would go, out with, friends, I would bring Indy with me. I wasn't
Yep.
gearing my life to be a soccer mom.
Right. Right.
And I'm gearing my life to like have Indy sort of as my sidekick in a way.
Right.
And that can be seen as selfish, but I feel like it's created such a beautiful, symbiotic, harmonious relationship between the two of us. And it's made it so that he is so flexible and so adaptable
Yep.
for anything that's going on around him. He's still in his center.
Yep. I've seen that in person. Yeah. And I think for some people, I did the soccer mom or the baseball mom thing, but that, like, my kid was very structured, and really needed and thrived on like structure. So I had to clip my wings a little bit, not that it bothered me, but I was like, oh, this is the kid I have. Okay, he used to draw. When he drew when he was 3, he would only draw in old calendars, like literally only in little boxes. And I was
Mm.
like, dude, I'm the most out of the box person there is. How'd I get this kid? So
Mm.
strange.
Hmm.
But that's how I feel like you just get you get a kid that you don't really, that pushes you, like you said, either to be a better person or out of your comfort zone, but there's some sort of stretching that happens there
Yeah. Thank goodness. I
that
love it.
changes you if you let it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, can you talk some about how people can learn more about you, what you do, how people
Yeah.
can work with you?
JamieGlowacki.com has everything. I will probably be adding like a line on my website of like if you're interested in trauma psychedelic work. Um, I am doing a separate Instagram page for the trauma work, and yeah, you could just email Jamie@JamieGlowacki.com if you are interested in working with me at all.
Beautiful. And are you still specializing in potty training, or is it really just the whole gamut these days?
I specialize in potty training to the degree that it's my living. I mean, the book now has been translated into 17 languages. I can't like it's such a it's like a cash cow, but I can't get away from it. I mean, I could drop it. I could drop it tomorrow, but I it does make my living, so I want to respect it. But I'm definitely tired of talking about poop for sure. So I like to get out of that realm. It's yeah. I've always been a chameleon in life, and I'm ready to become something new.
Beautiful. So here's to transformation and the beauty of plant medicine and healing our trauma so that we can become the best parents possible.
There you go. There's my tagline. There you go. I write that down under my Instagram name.
Well, it is always such a pleasure and a joy to talk with you, and I'm delighted that I got to share you with my listeners. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a joy.
Take care, everyone. Have a beautiful day.